Working for you. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for You is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for You.
Good afternoon and welcome to Working for You. I am Roy Williams. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's program, wherever you are. Your company, of course, is very much appreciated. Today we are going to be having a discussion on education, lifelong learning, because education is a lifelong process. And I have with me officials from the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, which is our premier tertiary institution in St. Kitts and Nevis. And today we will be sharing some of the programs that the Adult and Continuing Education Division has to offer to people in St. Kitts and Nevis. I have with me Miss Wanda Hughes, who is the Dean of Adult and Continuing Education. Miss Hughes, welcome.
Thank you.
And Nigencia James, who is the Marketing and Communications Specialist. Nigencia, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. It's not very often that I have people here from the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, but every time I do have staff, faculty from the college, it's always a very lively, very interesting discussion because it involves education. And education is something that all of us must be interested in and be concerned about.
Sure.
Because when we have a more educated populace, it redounds to the benefit of society and all of us and our own development, human, economic, sustainable development. It cannot really happen without the focus on education, whether it be formal education or informal. That is extremely important. But today we are specifically focusing on continuing education, and the focus is on adults. Of course, we know we have in our society people who have grown up, and for some reason or another, they were not able to probably complete their high school, or due to some circumstance, and so on. And that does not mean it is the end for them. They can still pursue their education. So, Ms. Hughes, the Division of Adult and Continuing Education, lifelong learning, what does the term mean, and what is its value for the individual and for the society at large?
Okay, in ACE, Adult and Continuing Education, we actually deal with education in a very flexible way. We are not overly interested in traditional education and whether or not they passed whatever and so on and so forth. We are looking at education that is flexible, that is diverse. We are looking at alternate times so that people can access programs regardless of. We are looking at any age group. So we don't necessarily deal with only adults. We also have teenagers, some of them as young as 15, who are doing courses with us. And of course, we go up to the seniors. We've had persons in their 70s doing courses with us. We've also had disabled students, because of course, they're very often shut out of education because of whatever reason. But we've also had those persons, even though CFB is not necessarily disabled accessible, but we try to accommodate wherever possible. We also see it in relation to not certification. We are not about necessarily somebody earning a certificate. We look at personal enrichment when we think about education. So, for instance, if you think about the retiree who is at home, and they want to do a course, but just to do a course. Or maybe to socialize, because usually in those classes, that's a big part of it. They're meeting people in their own age group, they develop a community, and so on and so forth. And so there's the personal enrichment element. We do some professional development courses. So persons who are already certified, already employed, and they want to improve, for instance, their administrative professional skills, and they can come and do a course with us. And then we have the traditional programs. We haven't forgotten CXC because, like you indicated, we have a pretty large percentage of persons who leave high school without 5 C6 subjects, especially including maths and English. And so we also have options for those persons. We also have options for those persons who leave high school and they cannot come to CFBC as full-time students. So they may have the 10, 12, 14 subjects, but they need to work because of whatever is going on at home and so on. And they can also come and they can look at the CAPE program, but they'll do it part-time, as opposed to ASGS, where it's done full-time. We even have 1 or 2 TVET programs. We don't have a lot of access there because of staffing, but where possible, we also try to include TVET.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned, Ms. Hughes, the people in their 70s, because we have come to believe that, people in their 70s and their 80s, what are they doing taking courses and going to school? I mean, sometimes at that age, people basically write people off. And, which is not a good thing for society, because, we must have a sort of inclusive approach of everybody, get rid of the stereotypes and the ageism, and all of that sort of a thing that exists within the society. So the lifelong, the stress on the lifelong, and you mentioned the people in their 70s and perhaps even older, that they are not written off. They can still engage their minds and
they can come and they can access whatever they want to access. At this point in time, we're actually developing an auditing policy, because our hope is that eventually those persons could literally come and sit in any class. Because if you're retired, you don't have to be anywhere at 10 o'clock in the morning. So if they want to come and sit in on, I don't know, an automotive engineering class at 10 o'clock in the morning, they should be able to come.
Right. But what do you think would be the benefit for somebody in that age bracket? Because sometimes you might think a younger person, well, they're being trained, they're being educated in a particular area so that they can join the workforce.
But education is not just about work. I think that is one of the major issues that we've had.
Yes.
Somewhere along the line, we kind of got sidetracked into believing that education is about work. And so you go and you get your CSEX, your advanced proficiency, your bachelor's, your graduate degree, because you're going into the workplace. But it can't be that limited. If it's that limited, we're not going to have any development. So, for instance, one of the courses that we have, and that's very popular, is our Computer for Seniors series. We actually have different courses. And I can tell you, the last one that we did, the students actually decided what they wanted to do. There was actually an outline. But then they started going, we want to learn to burn CDs. We want to learn to... And so it became a case of, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to look at what they want to do and we're going to incorporate that. And where that becomes important is, of course, they have grandchildren. They need to be able to interact with them in a meaningful way. When they're hanging out on their smartphones, their grandparents need to be able to do Facebook and Instagram and whatever. Or you're going to get that breakdown in relation to family. And a lot of times when they come, that's what they do. They come and they bring their smartphones, the tablet that whoever sent from wherever. Sometimes their family members are abroad. And so that is how they learn to communicate using technology so that they could keep in touch. And of course, that means they're now passing on all their knowledge and skills and so on to the younger generations. Without that, we're going to have that break, that technological divide.
The digital divide. I totally agree with you. At that age, sometimes you hear people say, technophobia. What is that? There's no need to be afraid of the technology.
Well, not if they come to the computer for seniors classes.
Precisely. There's basically no need because, as you said, it assists with communication. And communication is so important to keep the family network together and your friends and so on within the society.
I think the other element to it is so much can be done online. And just because they may be older and they don't have any muscle tone, it doesn't mean that they don't have a working brain and they can't develop some kind of entrepreneurial enterprise using the internet.
Yes.
So they need that kind of knowledge and that kind of skill so that they could continue to contribute.
Right. Now, there's another thing that you mentioned in terms of people who might be differently abled or what we call the disabled. And sometimes our education facilities have not really catered for such persons. I remember when I was lecturing at CFBC and you were my head, there was this young man, I don't remember his name, but I think he was from St. Paul's or somewhere around there. Yes.
Yeah, the gentleman.
And he was at CFBC, and because of his condition, I used to admire his mother actually taking him up those stairs on her back, which is such a stark reminder that, look, why do disabled people have to go through all of this to be able to access education? So that might not be the subject of this program, but it is something I think that the entire country, and in terms of how we build, for people who are disabled, people who are differently abled, and so on. Yes.
I think they also need to understand that even though CFB is not or was not built to accommodate the disabled, it doesn't mean that they can't attempt to access courses, because we do try to accommodate in our own way.
Right. And the importance of the online. Sometimes, the online, they can, access courses and so online and that sort of a thing. But I don't think you've gone there yet.
In a limited way, but not completely.
Right.
There's also, because sometimes when we think about disabled, we think about persons in wheelchairs and so on. But if you think about somebody who is 70-something years old, sometimes climbing up the stairs could be really taxing. So sometimes it's about accommodations, like making sure that the class is on the lower level.
Right.
Making sure that the lab at TechVoc is used, because that one is, they're going down steps as opposed to having to climb up.
Right, right.
So we do make accommodations whenever it's possible.
Sure. Now, the division, how is it organized in terms of your schedule and so on, to make it more accessible, of course, to the average working person, to the adult?
Okay, one of the things that most persons do not know is that our hours are actually 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. So they can't come to look for us in the morning because we're not there, because we ensure that we're there in the night. Classes are scheduled from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. We've also had classes until 9. Again, to accommodate persons who are working. When they finish work, they come in.
Yes.
So they don't have to worry about asking the boss for time off. The other thing that we do, and this one is informal, we do get students who have, those schedules where they're available this week, next week, who knows, and so on. And in those cases, what we do is we do whatever is necessary to accommodate them. If it is ensuring that they get all the notes via Google Classroom, if it is giving them a makeup test at some other time. So even persons with irregular schedules can come, because we go out of our way to ensure that they can access the programs that they need.
Right.
Because, of course, with working people, that's important. The other thing is, I tell them all the time, you don't have a babysitter? Bring the child to class. Don't think in terms of, I don't have a babysitter, I can't come to class. It is that you bring your child
In
to
fact,
CFBC with you.
that is a question that I had in terms of making arrangements for adults with children. Because while you may say bring them to class, children might be disruptive to the class.
CFBC has a campus that is a pretty safe environment. If they're older, a lot of times they are outside. You know, they're the grassy areas, so they can go out, they can play, and so on and so forth. Mrs. Broadbelt has been known to take them upstairs to the staff room and keep them there. So it all depends. What we don't want is that people stay away because they're going, you know, I have a 7-year-old and I don't have anybody to look after the child, and so on and so forth. Because then the 7-year-old isn't going to be 18 until, 10 years later?
Right.
So what are you going to do in that time?
You know, the CFBC has requirements, entry requirements. For example, if it's ASGS or you're at Tech Voc or Health Sciences, there are requirements. You must have certain subjects in order to be able to enter into certain programs. Does the division of ACE have requirements?
No, we are open admissions. Basically, you come and we meet you wherever you are. We do have students who come with the requirements. They tend to be younger students, or sometimes they're older students who may, because of circumstances, they were not able to access higher education when they finished high school. But most of our students come with nothing. We have students who, actually, Nigensia's mother is a good example. She came and she did her CSECs in 2 years, 5 CSECs in 2 years, and then she did CAPE in 3 years. So in 5 years, she had advanced qualifications. And a lot of our students are like that. They come in, particularly the older ones, they come in and they're 35, 40, 45, maybe 50 something. A couple of years ago, a student graduated who she said she got pregnant in high school. And so she didn't get to, and she said she always told herself she was going to go back. And she came at 50, about 51, I think, and did what she needed to do. So we don't ask for qualifications. If they have them, fine. If not, it doesn't matter. The other thing I want to indicate is that we also try to accommodate working experience. So we also have students who come in without CSET, and they can go straight into the advanced proficiency program. Because if you've been working in the accounting department in whichever business for 20 years, clearly you don't need to go back to CSEC accounting to move to the other level. So we also accommodate those students as well.
Okay. I know there are other adults, working adults, who take courses at CFBC. For example, I know there's the Office Administration and Management course, which is there's an evening program as well for them that caters for working students. So it's not just ACE. There are other programs that cater for working students.
Well, actually, in relation to CFBC, there is no age requirement. If a 35-year-old wants to apply to ASGS, the person can actually join ASGS as a full-time student.
Right.
It's just that in most instances people are working, so they haven't had that option. But we've had adults go through ASGS over the years. They go through Tech Voc all the time, not just the OADM program, but other programs. So it's really a matter of whether they can do it full time.
Right. Okay.
So if they can do it full time and they happen to be 65, they're free to come.
Okay. Now, the CXC programs that you have. Nigensia. Now you're the marketing and communications specialist. What does your role entail in the division?
My role isn't really a divisional role. It's more so for the entirety of CFBC.
Okay.
Basically, CFBC is doing a lot of things and the public needs to know what's happening. And that, of course, includes what's happening at the Adult and Continuing Education Division. So we're hoping to get the information out there in terms of the courses, the motivational symposium that ACE hosts. So once it involves something good happening at CFBC and we want the public to know, that's where I come in.
Okay, so that basically is your role. Now, what are some of the CXC programs that are being offered in ACE?
We do some of the CAPE programs, primarily business.
Yes.
We do accounting and we do entrepreneurship. We also do tourism. Those are the three that persons ask for.
Do you do
Generally,
communication studies and Caribbean studies?
those would be incorporated into those programs.
Okay.
So students can do them as individual units, or they can do them as part of the program.
Okay.
What we try to encourage people to do is to do the full package,
Mhm.
as opposed to just doing 1 or 2 units,
Mm-hmm.
because then they may not get the full value.
Right.
We
Go
also do
ahead.
some CSEC courses,
Mhm.
just a few of them. We do EDPM, we do IT, Human and Social Biology, English and Math, of course, and then we do POA, POB, OA, and Social Studies, about 10 of them. So we're basically looking at, in those courses, we get persons who don't have any subjects at all and who want to get some CSEC subjects. But we also get persons who probably failed maths. Most people do. They failed English. Lots of them do. We have persons who need, and this is an important group, they want to get into another division of CFBC. So they want to go into teacher ed, but they don't have a science. And they must have a science if they're doing primary education.
Yes.
So they would come and do human and social biology. This year we actually have some students who are trying to get into the BSN program. So they're doing prerequisites that they don't have. So we serve that purpose as well. And then the other students we have students out of the high schools. Sometimes because of the track that they're on, they're not allowed to do a particular subject, and they'll come and do that subject. Or sometimes they do it simply to reinforce the class.
Yes.
So they don't do exams with us, but they, if you're doing biology, human and social biology in high
Right.
school, and doing it at CFB, then clearly you're going to be strengthened as a student.
Right. Now, are there any exemptions in terms of the curriculum for these subjects? I know, for example, that ASJ students would have to do internal assessments, IA, and and the school-based assessments, the SBAs for those doing CSEC.
We can access paper 3, but we try to do the school-based assessment as much as possible, because that 20% could be really significant in terms of raising the grade that the student can earn. So as much as possible, we try to do the school-based assessments.
Okay.
Something else that I want to say is, for the CSEC subjects, we do 1 year and you do the exam. So it's not about, for maths, we have a 2-year program, but that's because sometimes we have students who've been out of school for 20 years and they haven't done maths in all that time. So we try to give them 2 years to really get back into the subject. But for everything else, it's 1 year.
Okay.
And for CAPE, CXC gives 5 years to complete the program, so our students usually take 3, 4, some 5.
Okay. Now you mentioned the technical and vocational aspects of education, because some people may not want, to do English, although English is so important, which they really should, but they might want to do something like sewing and some technical.
We have had persons asking us about sewing. The problem is we don't have a sewing center, so that makes it quite difficult. It's something that's still in the back of my head. But right now we actually have our DIY motor vehicle servicing course going on. And initially we kind of put it together thinking about women, because of course women usually, but the men showed up as well. So it's usually a mixed course. So that
Right.
one is going on right now, and it's hands-on. They actually work on vehicles. So it's competency based. So they actually learn to do, and then at the end of the course they have to do some servicing in order to get the certificate.
Now, Ms. Hughes, how do you go about choosing some of these courses? Because one of the things about education is that it must provide for the needs of the society, in terms of the demographics, in terms of what are the areas in society that basically need to be developed.
Okay, we do that in different ways. Some of the courses, particularly the short ones, some of them I met when I went into AC. But since then, we've looked at a number of others. We have functional Spanish. And functional Spanish came out of, actually, what we started with was the ESOL, English for Speakers of Other Languages. because of course we have quite a large number of Spanish speakers in the community. And so we started with that one, and then out of that we went to, but when these persons go into the banks, into Skelec and so on, and they're Spanish only, then the person behind the counter needs Spanish. And so now we have our functional Spanish course. And I can tell you, we've done it twice. The first time we had, I think they were from TDC. TDC sent quite a few people. The last time, Skelec sent persons. Now we're advertising it for our third session. So we're basically looking at what's going on around and saying, we have courses where sometimes it's about the client's demand. So individuals would call in and go, we want to do X, Y, Z. And if enough persons call, we then look at, often we're limited by what faculty is available. Because AC doesn't have assigned faculty. We rely on faculty from the other divisions. And of course, if they're fully loaded, then we can't access them. We have adjuncts, but then again, if the class isn't full enough, we can't pay them, which means we can't offer the course.
Right.
So we do have limitations, but we try as much as possible to look at what's actually needed, as opposed to simply developing a course. We talk to employers as well to find out if because they may not necessarily get in touch with us, but if we're thinking about a particular thing, we would ask.
I suppose that's where Nigencia would come in, because she's doing all this marketing and communication. So you're basically the one reaching out to the community.
Correct.
And trying to see how you can sell these programs, how you can get people to, to make these classes full.
Yes, that is one of my tasks. Dean Hughes and I have been working together on coming up with ways in which we can achieve the goals of the division, which include, of course, having full classes. And I think one of the issues is that because persons before weren't aware of what's happening, they were not sure of what avenues to find us at. So what we're planning on is reaching out to a wide variety of media houses across the Federation in order to get our message out there and let persons know what we're doing. And then Mrs. Broadbelt actually goes directly down to the businesses, into the communities, and she interacts with persons there to let them know what's happening at CFBC and ACE as well.
Right. Miss Hughes, it's interesting when you were talking about functional Spanish. And basically, that is really targeting the English community.
Yes.
People who want to learn Spanish and to learn Spanish to be able to function, whether they want to go to the doctor or to the bank or to go to the supermarket.
To communicate with the hairdresser, because
to
we have lots of Spanish
to communicate with the hairdresser. But because I relate with a number of Hispanics, I find that what is really needed, especially for them, so I don't know if they are being targeted, that that group.
The ESOL?
Yeah, because they need functional English.
We have had ESOL classes. Currently it's not on the schedule because what we discovered, quite a few people in the community are offering the class as well. Some of them free. So of course they're not going to pay for ours. So we haven't had it on the schedule this year, but we offered it for probably 3 years running, and we actually got to the point where we were doing beginners, intermediate, advanced, because sometimes they would come in. One police officer came in and he had his problem was writing. He was completely fluent. I wasn't even aware he was Latino until he told me, but he had problems with his writing. So of course he did the advanced level of the course. So we have been doing that.
Of course, because speaking Spanish doesn't necessarily mean that you were educated formally in Spanish. It's just like a lot of the Hispanics who are here speak a dialect.
Yes.
And most of them who come here, I don't find really access, because we don't really have an institution that teaches English per se. If you go to the Dominican Republic, there are many institutions where people there can go to these institutions to learn English. We don't have one here to teach them English. And so what they learn is basically on their jobs or whatever. They learn the street English.
Creole English.
Creole English. You know, and most of them are not able to write
Yes.
Spanish,
And
nevertheless
sometimes they
English.
can't write Spanish.
That's right.
We've had that experience where they can't, because what I did with the form for the ESOL was I actually did it in English and Spanish. And I discovered that there were one or two of them who couldn't read the Spanish. You know, I assumed putting the Spanish would have made it
Also.
easy, but they couldn't read the Spanish.
Right. You know. Now you also offer courses in hospitality, because that is an area, of course, you know,
That is in demand.
that is in demand, and we are now in
Critical
a
to economic
tourism.
development.
That is correct.
Okay, the certificate courses are different from our other courses. They're actually offered through the hospitality department.
Right.
And they're offered during the day.
Right.
It's a 1-year program, and it pretty much follows the associate degree track. So they do a lot of the same courses. So and what is important about it as well is if at end of the certificate program the student wants to transfer into the associate degree program, there's that avenue as well.
Okay.
So they can, and it's important for persons who are in the industry without hospitality certification. So they can come in and they can get that particular kind of certification so that they're more marketable. They could actually compete with the students who are leaving with hospitality certification. And then it's important in terms of their ability to move into higher education.
Okay. Now this certificate program in hospitality, do you partner with any other organization, or it's just basically a CFBC program?
The hospitality programs, I think they're affiliated with the CTU. The
Caribbean Tourism Organization. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
So it's not a fully local program.
Right. Right. Okay.
And by the way, the hospitality programs, they do both hospitality and culinary.
Oh, okay. 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 Right. So when they're finished, they can get a certificate that they can present.
Yes.
And to say, well, look, we have had this training.
And
so
that's
they can
important
get
for all of those persons without certification. Because we have so many people who are highly skilled, but they don't have any paper at all.
Right.
So if a job comes up and they're insisting on paper, they don't have any
it.
chance to go through the door.
You know, some people might come and they say, but I have so, a lot of experience working in this and working in that. But who knows?
Some jobs are asking for paper,
Some jobs are asking for paper.
especially nowadays.
The paper is important,
The
and,
demand is-
and especially if one is to travel and work, for example, throughout the region and so on. You basically need that piece of paper.
But sometimes even changing jobs. Last year I had a student who she was working at, I think it's Lutron when it closed.
Yeah.
And she had come in about 2 years before, and actually her boss sent her, told her, you know, you're here, you're doing all this stuff, and you don't have any certification. You need to go and do something.
Right.
And she came, and when Lutron closed, she had already started, she had done some O-levels, and she had started CAPE. And because of that, she was able to walk before she left Lutron. She had already lined up a job.
Right.
And she didn't go looking for it, they went looking for her. But without the certification, she wouldn't have gotten it.
Right.
So I think that is critical, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't seem to understand. They feel that, you know, I'm in a good job, I'm getting good money, and so why should I worry about certification? But then you never know when you might want to change jobs or have to change jobs, and then the issue of the paper is going to come up. I was speaking to a young lady the other day. She was applying for a course. She said she left high school, went to work, good money, never did anything, never went to university. Left, she has her own business, but she decided to go into government. And she was lamenting the salary. And she said to me, and the salary cannot move if I don't get higher certification. And that's something I think a lot of people don't remember. I think it's a dangerous thing, especially in this day and age, to sit down uncertified and not do anything at all. And we have lots of opportunities in St. Kitts and Nevis. In other places, they don't have any. But here we have opportunities. People need to get up and they need to do something. And the other dangerous thing that we do is we leave high school, we have 10 subjects, and we're not ready for university, and 10 years later we're still not ready, and 40 years later we're still not ready, and then we need to move. Or they bring in somebody 15 years younger with a degree and put them over our heads, and we're upset. But I think we need to understand that certification is important, especially in our context. Maybe elsewhere, maybe 30 years ago, but nowadays, certification is important.
I remember when I was growing up, you used to admire people who had the grey and white. You know, that is
the sixth form?
Sixth form. They were like the elites, and you know, they were revered.
Really?
You know, so to speak. And they were seen like once you had a sixth form education, then you had it. But then you realize that that's not enough. And so you move on to university, and then you have a bachelor's degree. And then you realize that's not enough. And then you have to have some sort of a postgraduate qualification, whether it be a master's or some other postgraduate course or something that you would have done. And so it keeps moving all the time.
Yes.
And it has to do with certification.
And we have to keep up. You know, I think a lot of us in St. Kitts, well, I'm not going to say Nevis because I'm not sure what the situation is there, but in St. Kitts, a lot of us have forgotten that things evolve, and if we don't evolve with them, we get left behind. And I'll just mention in TVET it's also the same thing, because of course you were just mentioning all the academic qualifications, but in TVET it's the same thing. We have so many highly skilled TVET persons, whether they are mechanics or whatever, and if they leave St. Kitts, they will never get a job at the level where they should be.
Right.
Or they'll get a job and they'll be underpaid because they have no paper. And of course the paper is not going to be a bachelor's degree. It might be some sort of certification for the particular field. You know, whether it's the Canadian certification or whatever. But a lot of our highly skilled TVET people, they figure, you know, I could fix a car in my sleep, so I don't need any certificate. And a lot of times they need to get that certification because we actually live in a community where people move all the time. Most of us do not live in St. Kitts. For 40 years, we spend time out. Sometimes we go out and don't come back. So we need to be prepared.
But sometimes too, Miss Hughes, I wonder why we make these compartments and these dichotomies. Sometimes we say, oh, this is TVET. And because you're in TVET, you're not academic. But the TVET program is an academic one because it includes theory. It includes all of that. I mean, you can do your PhD in motor vehicle, you know, engineering or whatever the case might be. What I found when I taught at TVET, and some of those guys in these programs at the motor vehicle and so on, they would ask me, what's the point in doing English? You're teaching them English. I don't see what's the point. I am going to be fixing cars and I am going to, you know, and so on. What's the point in me taking an English course?
My response to that question, because of course I taught them, the same guys, English as well. And I always said to them, are you going to work for somebody for the rest of your life? Or are you going to eventually move out on your own? And in that case, yes, you could hire a secretary, but how do you know that what she's writing makes sense if you don't know when you read it what you should be looking for? And that was always my response for them, because TVET persons need to stop thinking in terms of I have skills and I'm going to go and work for John Brown. They need to be thinking about entrepreneurship.
Or you have to write an accident report. Or you have to do
an estimate.
An estimate.
You know, the ECCB wants you to fix their fleet of vehicles, assuming they have one. And they ask for an estimate. Who's going to write it for you?
And not only that, motor vehicle today, they're computerized. And so it means you have to understand something in terms of computers and mathematics and so
IT.
on. You know, so I
Again-
say that to say in the whole, you know, comprehensive education, you know, and how it is seen, because sometimes we make these dichotomies, these compartments and so on. We have to see everything as a whole.
Yes.
And as you correctly said, you know, education must be flexible. It must be
Yes.
diverse, because we are talking about lifelong education. And I'm sure, Miss Hughes, that some of the things that you would have found is that because of age and because of maturity, people have a different approach to learning.
Yes. Adult
So-
learners, it's easier to teach them. They tend to be motivated. When they have a full-time job, they have a husband, a partner, and children, and they decide to come and spend 4 nights a week at CFB, they're motivated.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're ready to do whatever is necessary to get the job done. And
Yeah.
so it's easy to support them. No, it's one of the reasons I switched to ACE. From the unmotivated to the motivated.
I totally agree with you. And sometimes you see people, you know, they are going to university and they are going in the night after a full time, you know, working,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
And these are the people, you're so correct. While the teenagers and so on, the early 20s and
They
so
have
on,
time.
they're out drinking and partying
They
and,
have
and,
time.
and that's, they have time. And these people are serious, you know, serious with their work, and they often get through and they often do very well,
Yes. They tend to do quite well.
you know.
And especially sometimes when I look at the results and I think that they've been out of school for 20 years, 25 years. But not only that, they left school without basic qualifications. When you look at the results, it's, you know, they certainly outperformed me,
Right,
even though I went the traditional route.
right.
Yeah.
So I think what people need to understand is, look, there's no shame in going back to school. It doesn't matter what age you are. Sometimes, because I've heard people say, I will feel shame, or I don't want anybody know that I can't read. You know that. You know, literacy programs.
That is usually an issue, yeah.
You know,
The-
I will be too embarrassed.
But you see, they need to understand it's not like they're going to be sitting out there in the open. You know, you're either going to be with the facilitator, or you're going to be with people like yourself. And one of the things in ACE, when we deal with persons who are there for literacy, they do not complete the regular registration form. You know, we try to shield them as much as possible
Right.
because we do know that exists.
Do you have any sort of a literacy program?
We don't have a formal literacy program, but Mrs. Broadbelt is our literacy person. So when we have persons with issues, she works with them. You know, and we try to keep it as private as possible. So
Right.
that
I mean,
They
St.
don't have
Kitts
to
and
worry
Nevis has a
about it.
very high literacy rate. They say we are somewhere in the 90s.
functional literacy.
You're so correct, Miss Hughes. Functional literacy rates. I suppose reading is one thing, reading comprehension is another. You know, I might be able to call a few words, but do I understand what it is that I'm reading and so on? Am I a critical reader? Is it everything that I see in a book, or is it everything that I see on social media that I'm going to follow and believe? Am I able to do some sort of a, you know, discerning, you know, what is valid and what is rubbish, and all of that sort of thing, you know?
And it's one of the things that adult learners need to understand. A lot of times, and it's something I used when I dealt with students, you know, the teeny boppers, I call them, the 17, 18-year-olds. And I always said to them, your parents know more than you. And they'd say to me, oh, my mother only has O levels or whatever. And I would say to them, but yes, remember the life experience. She's 25 years older than you. She's been learning for those 25 years. You weren't around. Which
Yes.
means you weren't learning anything. And I think it's something that we need to understand, that even though you might be walking into the classroom and you don't have any certification, what you're bringing to the table is so much more than the other person is bringing. And the example I like to use is when I was in university and I was doing it was the undergraduate Shakespeare course. We were doing a class and there was a retired high school teacher from Barbados in the class. And she and the professor engaged in a conversation that had us simply sitting there and looking dumb. And it was all about the time. It was about her work experience and so on and so forth. And a lot of times we don't place any value on that. But that's something that's very important. I mean, the reality is
The informal.
I have higher academic credentials than my mother. But my mother is my guru because she knows so many things I go to her with. And she goes, oh, because for her it's a minor matter. I'm just bumping into it for the first time. And so people need to understand that you may be coming for the certification, but you're bringing something to the table.
Yes.
You're not coming empty.
Right.
So you
Tabula
don't have
rasa.
to be embarrassed. Because if you sit in class with the traditional sixth former, you know more than that sixth former. The sixth former may have theoretical knowledge, but they don't know anything else because they haven't lived. But you have all the other knowledge, and guess what? You'll catch up on the theoretical. It's not
Yes,
that
you
difficult.
bring it. That's
Yeah.
right. You would have seen it, you would have lived it, and so on. It is just to...
And
you
so
know.
ultimately, you're in a better position.
Mhm.
And that is why they need to simply get up and access.
Right, right. Now, some of your short courses, I know you have the longer ones like the CXC and so on, but you have a number of short courses. I know you mentioned the functional Spanish,
Yes,
I'm assuming,
that's one of them.
which is one of them. And when you say short, what's the
Short-
duration?
Okay.
And what
The
are some of
shortest-
them?
The shortest one we have is our 3-day estate planning seminar, which persons can access if they're interested in, things related to inheritance, the inheritance laws, how to set up your will, and so on and so forth.
Right,
And that is facilitated by a lawyer. It's usually done in summer.
right.
We have a baking series that has been quite popular. We do cakes and cookies, then cake decorating and the breads and pastries. Our computer for seniors courses are all short courses. Those tend to be 12 weeks. Baking courses are 8. The one I mentioned, the motor vehicle course, that one is 6. So they range from 3 days to 12 weeks. Some of them are 1 day a week. The hands-on courses tend to be 1 day, and we do 3 hours. Or I usually tell them the class begins, and for instance, when they're baking, it's when they're finished with the product. So sometimes it might be 4 hours as opposed to 3. The regular classroom courses, they tend to be 2 hours and twice per week. So it depends on the course. We have 2 new courses that we're actually marketing right now. One is a mass communication seminar series that is really aimed at persons working with the media houses or persons who might be interested but are not quite sure, so they may want to explore to see what it is like. And then we have our Money Matters course. And the Money Matters course, I think, is important because I think at this point in time in St. Kitts and Nevis, we are now a middle-income country, which means we used to be the low-income country. When people were making, I have a colleague who told me that she started working for $20-something a month, which for me is unimaginable. For Nigeria, it's even more unimaginable.
Definitely.
And I think back then, in the 70s and so on, we didn't really think about investment, for instance, because we didn't have anything to invest. Now that we're a middle-income country, we're much more prosperous, I think. We have money over there on the side. And of course, the interest rates have bottomed out. Nowadays, they tell you get 1%. So why bother to put it in the bank? I think, we need something like this where we're learning about not just savings, but about investing, about moving it to the other level. Maybe getting some blue chip stocks. Well, okay, maybe that's not a good idea in the age of Corona. But basically, I think we need to move to that level. And this course is going to be delivered by Peter Adrian, he's worked at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. He's been an advisor at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. He's a certified business coach. And so he has a lot to bring to the table that I think we can benefit from, those of us who don't know anything about investing, for instance. But persons also have problems with budgeting. We live above our means all the time. And so even that aspect of the course is important because we need to learn to manage our money. That is the money we have, not the money we think we have, but the money we actually have.
Mm-hmm. The problem? Some people are very good at wanting to manage other people's money. Because they will tell you how much money you have and they will rationalize to you why you should have to give them this and why you should have to give them that. And they'll come begging you, and when you don't give it to them, they will curse you, and they will... All kinds of things you find like that in our society today. And they always think that, you have, and so you have it to give me. What about you managing your money?
Well, they need to do this course.
Right. What about you, prioritizing? Mm-hmm. And these are the very same people. They come and they're begging you, but at the very same time, you see them having a great life, and they're down at the terminal and they're drinking and they're smoking away and they're...
So maybe that's because they haven't had Mr. Adrian to tell them how they can put that money to better use. And so hopefully persons will sign up for this course because I think it's important at this point.
Yeah.
In time?
Yes, so I think it is because sometimes we talk about the economy and the country's economy. Mm-hmm. And people say, the economy, and they blame the economy and so on. But what about your personal economy?
Right.
Sometimes your economy is not so good because of you're not properly managing your money and your finances and all that sort of a thing. And it's easy to say, boy, things brown, and things, things could be better and so on. But how are you managing your money? Mm-hmm. How are you investing it? How are you saving it? How are you really looking at your needs?
Yes.
Rather than your wants. Mm-hmm. And that sort of a thing, which I think is a very important course indeed.
The other one that's being offered right now is Introduction to Psychology. Mm-hmm. And that too I think is important, particularly for persons working, I think teachers. I think about police officers, the prison officers, persons working, interacting directly with, so it's good to know exactly
people in human
how
resource.
people function.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we may even have advanced degrees, but no psychology in there at all.
None.
And so sometimes when we're having difficulties managing people, it's because we don't really know what makes them tick. And so this course
or what makes them not tick.
Mm-hmm. I think this course would be important for, for everybody, but particularly the pastors, the lay preachers and so on, Sunday school teachers.
Yeah, well, any course if you consider yourself a pastor, well, I must know if I use that because that is being used very loosely today. But if you would do any course that is worth its worth in theology or anything like that, it includes
psychology.
All of that.
But
Psychology.
That is why I said, because a lot of that, sometimes you could have a pastor who didn't necessarily go through a theology program.
Mm-hmm.
And so those kinds of persons would be able to access that sort of training in that course.
Mm-hmm. Counseling as well.
Yes. Because a lot of times we use non-traditional ways to get into the positions that we're in.
True.
We don't necessarily go through.
Have the training.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in a case like that, this is an opportunity to get that training.
Right. Good. Anything in floral? You have anything in floral decoration and so on?
Not at this point.
Not at
in
that
time.
point.
But we do have some of the other courses that we have. We have, for instance, Fundamentals of Written English. We've done that one. And that one was an interesting one because we actually had some of those non-native English speakers came to that course.
Mm-hmm.
And they did pretty well. So we did effective public speaking last semester.
Right.
So we try to do a range of courses that so that people.
Yeah, and those things really are make you function to be able to function in society. So I remember before I asked in terms of how are you really catering to the developmental needs of the society. Public speaking
It's critical.
is critical, and it is one in which so many people.
And it intimidates them.
It intimidates them. You would be surprised how many people are afraid, for example, to go in front of a crowd
Yeah.
and to make an address, or even to appear before a camera.
Actually, they can't even get up in front of 5 people, much less a crowd.
And it's the fear. I mean, that's part of it. That can be overcome.
Yes.
But sometimes the fear comes out of the feeling the inadequacy.
Yeah.
You see?
Point.
You're feeling inadequate, or you're feeling that you're not good enough.
Yes.
Or you're feeling that I am not sufficiently prepared. Or have the know-how. And so the fear comes. But
so-
sometimes the fear is reduced if you learn the skills as
Yes,
you...
because in our course we cover all of those things, including confidence. So that,
Yeah.
and of course, it's one of those competency-based courses where you have to do.
Right.
And so, if you've never done it before, in that class, you have to do.
Right. No, that brings me to something else, Miss Hughes. You mentioned that word confidence. What does it have to do with education? And especially for adults. You're dealing with adults and so on. How does it help them in terms of their confidence?
Education builds self-esteem. I think at any level, it builds self-esteem. At that level, it's critical, especially for the ones who did not have certification. When they get that piece of paper, it is a major issue. And there's so many of them. We had a student who graduated a couple of years ago, and he said he had never graduated from anything before. And so for him, it was so important. So as a confidence builder, it's extremely important.
It
And
empowers.
sometimes we use lack of education to alienate people, to undermine their confidence. So of course, they may never be confident if they don't have that piece of paper or that training. So that's important. Before we move on, I have to mention my flagship short course, Leadership.
Yes.
The CFBC Jenkins Limited Leadership course. And that course I think it's special. It's a course where we have 33 places, and this year there are 38 people in the class. And nobody has dropped out. It's almost finished. And of course, every year I get cursed off because I send out the acceptance letters, then I send the rejection letters. Well, it's not really rejection. And then I get the emails coming back, telling me whatever. So it's in demand. I think it's an important course because leadership is critical to our development. And it's critical I'm not just talking at the national level, but you think about what's needed in a home. It's leadership. So it's not just about taking it outside, it's about inside your house. Those skills are required. And it's a course that covers a range of things. One of the important things, for me, one of the most important things that it covers is it looks at nationalism, patriotism, looking at national leaders. So the leaders they look at are not, we're not looking at Bill Gates and
Right.
whomever else. We're looking at the persons who contributed here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so I think it's a very important course. Right now, in fact, right now we're actually talking about developing a leadership juniors so that we could get teenagers on track before they even get out there.
This Jenkins course has been going for a number of years, right? It's over
I
5 years,
think
I'm sure.
Sunday was the 7th anniversary.
Was the 7th anniversary of
Yes,
it?
the
Okay.
8th cohort is in place.
Right.
So they
And
will
it's
graduate
always
later
full.
This year. Always.
So it is.
It is always full.
So you can see that it is something that is in demand, and obviously it is a very good course
It is
because
and it covers everything. It's not just about leadership style and decision making and so on. They do things like etiquette,
right.
which I know is important because I've heard about some of the experiences that people have had. We don't think about things like fine dining as a skill that we need until we get in a situation where there are like 12 pieces of cutlery and
Yeah.
you're not quite sure what to do. And that course covers those kinds of things.
And ethics as well, I suppose. Leadership
yes,
ethics.
So it covers the range down to communication. And this year, for the first time, communication is run throughout the course. Because, of course, when we are talking communication, whether written or oral, we do tend to have major problems.
Right.
And so it's evolving as well. So
Okay.
I had to talk about leadership.
Sure. What about your seniors courses? We spoke about the seniors. What specifically do you have for them?
Right now, the major one that we have is Computers for Seniors, and we do both. We do a master in your PC. So for that one, they actually learn about the computer itself, and then they learn some Word. We've also done Excel, because sometimes they ask for Excel. Then we have our social networking, where they actually learn, to email, to use Facebook. They set up their Facebook accounts and so on and so forth. And as I indicated to you, this is one of our most
Yes.
flexible courses, so that when they come, for instance, they come and they bring, sometimes they have the tablet, the smartphone, the laptop.
So it's
And
hands-on.
it's hands-on, where they actually learn to use their devices, set up their passwords, whatever they need. That's how we deal with that one. One that we're looking at, we're looking at some others that are geared specifically towards that age group. One of them that I want to mention, because I'm hoping we'll be able to do it soon, is we are thinking about looking at some literature courses, maybe Shakespearean tragedy. And they just come and go through the play, look at some films. Because so many people, they know Shakespeare, they've heard about Hamlet, they may have seen a movie, but they've never actually gone through that play and analyzed it or anything. So we thought that would be something that would be, and we're thinking in relation, not just drama, but maybe doing it with poetry.
Right.
We have people like Derek Walcott. How many people have actually read his poetry in any meaningful way? And he's, of course, one of our Caribbean icons.
Yeah,
So
but when I was
we're
teaching
looking
at
that.
CFPC, some of the students didn't even know who Derek Walcott was.
Right.
They couldn't even tell you who V.S. Naipaul was. And he's another Nobel
Yes.
laureate in literature.
So we are looking at bringing in some of those courses so that, persons could come in at their leisure, go through whether it's a novel, some poetry, a play, and, do the analysis without the pressure of having to do an exam.
Right. Miss Hughes, I'm going to go to the phone lines. We'll continue with discussion, but just in case anyone wants to call in and to ask anything with respect to the programs and so on that you mentioned. Our numbers to call are 465-2555. That's the local number. And the overseas number is 1718-577-2916. 1718-577-2916. The lines are open.
In the meantime, we haven't discussed UE Level 1.
No.
That is the University of the West Indies Level 1 program. It's a program that has existed at CFB since 1998, I think. it allows students with an associate degree, that's the entry requirement, to come to CFB and actually do the first year, the first UE year. 10 classes, 30 credits.
Yes.
At a much lower price than they would pay if they were to go on campus or even to open campus.
So it's the first year, which would include some of those foundation courses.
Right. The courses that students usually subscribe to are the business courses. We do accounting, management, economics. We also have sociology, and then they can also do humanities, French, Spanish, linguistics, history, and IT and mathematics. They do not actually apply to CFBC. They would actually apply to the University of the West Indies.
Get accepted there.
And when they apply, they would indicate for the campus, they would pick CFBC. So they'd be full-time UE students. But the campus is CFBC. They do UE programs. We deliver the programs, but the course outline, the course material, they all come from UE.
We have a caller. Working for you, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Lesroy.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, and your team there. Don't know the name, but your team.
Yes, I have the Dean of the Adult and Continuing Education, Miss Wanda Hughes, and Nigencia James, who is the Marketing and Communication Specialist.
It's a lot of woman. Anyway, great program as usual. I think it would be only fitting when we are talking like the topics you all are speaking about today. You know, if we could, it would be nice if we could balance it out, the theory with the practical part. Because some people, you know, you go and you go to school and then you go to university, and all because you might have 9, 8, 7 subjects and whatsoever it is. So you major on the theoretical part of it, and the practical part is being left out. So when you done achieve all those titles, and you come back home and you win the dropping off, and you care muffler dropping off, you still have to go look for somebody to fix the window and a mechanic to put back on the muffler. So I think when you teach, while you teach academical lessons, I think you should teach the practical part of it too, like the mechanical part of it. So have it balance out 50-50. And earlier, one of you said that, you know, a lot of people just don't put the money to better use. Let me use my term. And the bars were mentioned. Yes, there are 3 ways that people spend the money. Some spend it at the bar, some spend it at the bar, and some bank it in a bank that you can go any day and punch your card and withdraw, and some bank it on a bank where there is no withdrawal slips. Thanks for listening.
Okay. Thank you for your call. Okay. He spoke about the theoretical and the practical and the courses and so on, but I think you did touch on some of that. But it,
Yes.
you know,
For most of the ACE courses, they're competency based, which means that there's a balance
right.
of the practical. Because we do, particularly for short courses, there are usually no written tests. The test is usually something practical.
The baking course, which
The
you
baking
mentioned.
courses they have to produce at the end of the
A cake.
course, a cake, a pizza, whatever.
Something baked.
And so a lot of those students, one student who did the baking course, he left and he went and he set up his pizza business.
Right.
So
Right.
so we do try to put that component in.
Right. So they're actually equipping you, not just with theory, but so that when you go out there, you'll be able to implement something.
And in
and the-
relation to CFB as a whole, I think the only division where it's largely theoretical is ASGS. And that's because those students, for the most part, are the ones who will probably leave and go on to university to do the traditional bachelor's,
Yeah.
master's, and so on.
Right.
But if we think about TechVac, highly practical. Nursing, of course, is practical. And
Yes.
teacher ed is also practical.
Right.
So I think when we talk about CFBC, by and large, there is that balance. And even in the ASGS programs, a lot of the courses have the SBAs. They tend to be practical in the context
They
of
are.
academics. Okay, and I think one of the things people need to understand is, for instance, my field is literature.
Yes.
Okay, my practical is research. It's, and I didn't do creative writing, I did hard literature.
Right.
So that's my practical thing. And so practical in the sense that he was talking about wouldn't apply if somebody is focused on literature or say history
Right.
and so on and so forth. And of course, he talked about, you do all of that theoretical stuff and then you can't fix your car. That's why we have the DIY course.
Right.
I did that course, for instance. So I can actually do some
So you
stuff on
can
my
change
car.
your tire and so on.
Yes.
Okay.
Some of them I don't want to do though, like change the oil. No,
Is it too messy?
that too.
Okay. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. William.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. William, I'd like you all to focus more on the English and the mathematics by letting people know that they must take these advanced classes and go through exactly what I think is best for them. Because when you send out an application to a company, first thing they would like to know if you have an English or a mathematics CXC. And these two here travel together like brothers and sisters. And you must have them in whatever field you go into. So therefore, I would like you all to even give a little more input of the mathematics and the English from the field.
Thank you very much for your suggestion. Those, of course, are foundation.
Yes, and both of them, we do both in ACE. We have 2 math courses. One is exam prep. So for those students who may have failed it in May, they can actually come in and prep for the January exam. And then we have the 2-year course. So persons who need that grounding, they actually have 2 years to prep. And then they do the exam.
Right.
English we do on a yearly basis.
You know, Ms. Hughes, most employers, to underscore what the caller was actually saying, ask for effective communication skills, speaking
And writing. And
and
listening.
writing and listening. And a number of our people fail in that area. You would be amazed to know that people who you would consider even educated sometimes don't have the faintest idea about how to make a subject agree with a verb, and that has to do with the failure of our system. It was so bad that UWI had to introduce this, English for academic purposes, and had to introduce this thing that you have to pass before you.
The ELPT.
The ELPT.
The proficiency test. I think the reality is English in the Caribbean is impacted by Creole English, which is the vernacular for most people. And I think one of the things that needs to happen, and I think it used to happen, when I was growing up, kids spoke Creole English and they spoke Standard English. They left the Creole English outside the classroom door. And when you went into classes, I was taught by people like Marcella Liebert and Marilyn Rogers and so on, you could not open your mouth and speak Creole English in those classrooms. And so whether you got it at home or not, you learned to. So basically, most people were bilingual. The problem is nowadays most people only have Creole English. And so when they go into that Standard English classroom, it's impacted by Creole English. And so there was some kind of breakdown somewhere along the way. I have ideas about what it might be.
Right.
But somewhere along the line, we need to get back to that point where people understand that Creole English is one language, and it's fine in its place, but there's also the need for Standard English. And so
but-
the two are separate. And so the kids are actually educated in standard English, so that when they get to fifth form and it's time to write the exam, passing
But
it is
what
just...
it is when the class, the English class, or the standard English class, or what is supposed to be the standard English class, is been the teacher is speaking Creole in the classroom. I mean, let's face it, language, part of the learning of language is the audiolingual. I first listen. A child listens first. So it's what the child hears that the child repeats. So for example, before that child even enters kindergarten, if the parents at home are not speaking standard English around that child, when the child enters kindergarten, the child, it's more difficult for the child, because now you enter into an environment, a classroom, where you're hearing one thing and you're hearing something else. All you know is what you would have learned in the home.
I think you identified one of the major problems. The classroom must be a standard English environment. And of course that's going to begin with whoever is teaching the class. And I don't care what the subject is. The language of instruction should be standard English. Because for that child coming out of the Creole English household, the only way that person is going to access standard English is in the classroom. So if the teacher is speaking Creole English, then the problem is compounded. And I think that's where the breakdown has happened. When I was in school, I never heard any of my teachers speak in Creole English.
Yeah.
Maybe if you pass them on 4th Street, but certainly not in the classroom. And of course, they didn't allow us to use Creole English in the classroom. And so you learned to separate the two. Nowadays, as you said, some people are teaching in Creole English. And
But
I've
Creole
heard the
English is not
excuse-
universal, and that's the point.
But I've also heard the excuse that the kids don't understand standard English, and it's not true. You know,
So when they watch
whether
TV
they speak Creole English or not, they understand standard
They
English,
do.
and I think that must be the language of instruction, and I think that's where the problem is.
I often think, sometimes I look at these people who excel in sports or whatever the case is, and then, the reporter comes to them on the field and is interviewing
embarrassing.
them, and it's really embarrassing. And you are speaking to, a worldwide audience, and you really cannot even express yourself in the standard English, which is universal. It is.
And you get it at all levels. I sat in a forum with ministers of education,
Mhm.
and I was totally humiliated because the use of language was so poor. And then there were the Africans and the Greeks, and they were speaking better English than the Caribbean people, even though for them it was a second language. And the problem is Creole interference. And until we get to that point where we acknowledge that we must have a separation of the two in education, we're going to continue to have the problem.
Right, and people must learn that you have to know what context to use the Creole and what context to use the standard in. You can't be in a formal situation and you're using Creole. For example, you go for an interview, those things and things like that.
And we also have to understand that until we get an institution that is going to look at standardizing Creole English, it cannot be used in any formal setting. It is not papiamento.
Right.
Or
Or in Haiti, what they try to do with
Yeah.
the
Until we can do that, it can't be used. And so no use making the argument that whatever. And that's why we have so many problems with English.
we do. Miss Hughes, did you finish speaking about the UE Level 1 program? I think that's when the call came in. That's what we were speaking about. Were you
Okay.
finished?
I was going to add that the application period is now open, so persons can go ahead and apply. They apply online. The business subjects are UE St. Augustine. The humanities and maths and IT are KFIL.
Yes.
So they would go online, look for the campus, the specific campus, complete the application, and then they'll get a receipt that tells them what supporting documents they need to submit. And I always say to them, when you apply, let CFBC know that you've applied, so that we could kind of keep track because of course they're not applying via CFB.
Right. Right.
The supporting documents would be certificates, high school transcript, CFBC transcript. And by the way, when I said associate degree, not just CAPE, teacher education associate degrees, the TechVoc associate degrees, particularly OADM, can also be used. Another note, something they need to know is if they're applying for social sciences, the accounting and economics and so on, mathematics, CSEC mathematics is a requirement. If they don't have it, they will not be accepted.
Right.
So what the caller was saying again, it's extremely important. They'd probably get deferred acceptance and they would have to get it for the following year.
That's right. Okay. I suppose this question, why ACE, Adult and Continuing Education, as opposed to a private tutor? And what does CFBC offer that a private tutor can't?
I think we have some advantages that private tutors cannot come up with. We have a library. That's an important one. They can access the entire campus because a CFB student is a CFB student. It doesn't matter what division the student is in. Computer labs, they can access that. They can access other programs. So if you're a student at CFB and you look around and you decide, you know what, I would like to do that course over there, which may not be a part of ACE, that access is there as well. So we have a campus, we have a whole campus where they can come there if they need study space. They can come there on a Saturday, on a Sunday, sit in the common room area or maybe in the cafeteria, and they can actually study, quiet space and so on. So we do have those things.
Right. So there's more support.
Yes.
There are more support systems and facilities in place. Working for you, good afternoon.
And your guest.
Yes, good afternoon.
No, I think we all talking about learning English. I think what it should be really be, you should be learning grammar. You should be saying you're learning grammar. But if you learn grammar in English, you could use grammar in Spanish as well. And you use a term there where you made a statement there a while ago that, you go on the field and somebody interviewing somebody fellow I tried to speak about it. I had an experience when they had the World Cup here. I was sitting in a stand and I had on my left side an Australian and on my right side a local guy. So we were arguing cricket left and right with V. Richard and Brian Lara and whatnot. And each time the person on my right says something, I had to interpret it for the Australian. Because what as you say, he was speaking local English. You understand? And then when the Australian says something to me on my left side, I had to explain to him on the right side, telling him improper grammar. So what I think we should be saying is, we should be, as a matter of fact, even going to school, you should be saying our subject for at 2 o'clock would be grammar. Grammar is the construction used in parts of speech to express a language. So if you learn, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you more. If you were to take up a Spanish book that has it in English, it seems to me it teaches the English better than the book that you take up for English to teach you English. I don't know if that sounds puzzling.
Oh.
But I'm telling you, what we should be saying is we go in school, we're going to do math and grammar today. Grammar, it is of course we are learning it in English. But once you learn grammar in English, grammar could be used in Spanish, in French, anything. It could be applied here. Okay, man, good.
Okay, thank you, caller. I think that I hear your point, but grammar is only one part of language. It's only one aspect of language, actually, that has to do with the rules of any language. But you also have other things in terms of language, the phonology, the sound system, the syntax, and all of that sort of a thing. But you did make a good point in that it's very difficult to learn the grammar of any other language if you don't know the grammar of your own.
Yes. And it's really fundamental to everything else.
Mhm.
And it's one of the weaknesses that we have. The students are not taught grammar. So they don't know the rules, which means they don't know why they're doing what incorrectly.
Yeah, but Monsieur's part of the problem too sometimes we have is the phonology, the sound, the pronunciation of words. That is also a problem because sometimes, we say we are speaking standard English, but at the very same time, our phonology, our pronunciation is Creole, which is not standard
Again,
English.
Creole interference.
Yeah. Like to say ban, when we want to say band. The D is not pronounced.
It's
Or
the major
san.
issue. The major issue in language is Creole interference. That is the major issue.
And I think that is what some of the gentleman was basically alluding to.
But I think he's correct in terms of grammar being fundamental to the whole thing. I mean, how do you write if you don't know grammar? How do you speak if you don't know grammar?
Right.
And so that has to be taught
The rules.
in addition to everything else.
I think we are almost out of time. Now, in terms of someone who wants to register for ACE and so on, what should they do? What's the procedure? Nigel, you want to tackle that?
Sure. So registration forms are available at the cashier as well as the CFBC main office. Like Dean Hughes would have mentioned earlier, the hours are 1 to 8, so you can get the registration form from Dean Hughes or Mrs. Broadbelt during that time period.
Or the receptionist.
Or the receptionist as well, yes, thank you. There's payment plans if you're not able to put forward the full payment for the courses. They do offer payment plans. You just have to speak to the bursar about that. So, like the courses and the time that the courses are offered are flexible. The payment is, well, there's some flexibility in that area as well.
Okay.
In
Now we'll
relation to the CSEC courses, the application procedure would be the same as all the other CFBC programs.
Right.
They have to apply online at cfbc.edu.kn, and applications will open on the 1st of April.
Yes.
Okay.
So April 1st to July 31st, unless they want to pay a $50 late fee. So they
Right.
need to apply early.
And that
Now-
relates for all the divisions. Except
Okay. And in terms of cost, I know we didn't mention that it's not free. These things are not free. We didn't mention any sort of a cost, so people can have an idea in terms of what they have to pay, because they might think it's free.
Well, the costs
not.
vary. For the CSEC program, it's somewhere in the region of $900 for one subject. That's for the year. For one subject, and it goes up by $150 for every additional subject. For advanced proficiency, it's $1050 for one subject, and it goes up by $250 for each additional subject. The short courses, the prices vary. The ones we're going to be offering, mass communication is $500.
100,
Money Matters $600.
40.
40.
Functional Spanish is $500, and Intro to Psychology is $300.
Okay. Now, if you needed somebody to teach this course, you could have called me.
Which one?
Functional Spanish.
I'll remember that next.
Okay, good. Is there anything else you want to say?
I would just want to encourage people to apply for whatever program might be relevant to their lives. And for those persons who have no certification at all, I think they need to begin thinking in terms of doing something, even if not with CFBC, something with some institution, some tutor, so that they can fix that.
Right. And it's never too late.
No.
Learning is
Lifelong.
lifelong, as you began in saying. Learning is a lifelong process. It never stops until there is no breath, basically, in us. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a classroom. It's also learning takes place outside, everywhere. Everywhere it takes place, and we must seize the opportunities.
Yes.
I think to better ourselves and to become more equipped with skills and knowledge.
So that we could be of benefit to the Federation.
Benefit to and benefit to ourselves.
And one last thing I would like to add is that these courses begin the week of March 30th.
Okay. Also, the short courses.
The short
Yes.
courses.
The short courses begin at the end of March.
Correct.
At the end of March. Okay. But registration takes place from now.
Yes, it's ongoing.
It is ongoing.
Yes.
So okay, good. I hope that you get a lot of people to sign up
We hope so too.
for these courses. Well, thank you very much, Miss Hughes and Nigencia, former student of mine.
Thank you for having us.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. You have been listening to another edition of Working for You. Thank you very much for listening to today's program and such a very important topic, that of the adult and continuing education. Learning is lifelong. It's never too late to sign up to take courses and so on. Next week we will be back for another edition of Working for You. Until then, I am Lesroy Williams. Have a good day.
Working for you. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Lesroy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for You is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for You.